Without any ties to the South or to slavery, he chose the Confederacy apparently because in Missouri, this allowed him to attack all symbols of authority. He attracted to his gang some of the most psychopathic killers in American history. James McPherson on Quantrill. The leader of the most brutal group of fighters during the Bleeding Kansas-Missouri border war, William Quantrill, will always be remembered as the fiercest bushwhacker of those troubled times. Born on July 31, 1837, to Thomas Henry and Caroline Cornelia Clarke Quantrill, young William showed his cruel tendencies from an early age. Reportedly, as a child, he would shoot pigs in the ears to make them squeal, nail snakes to trees, and tie cats' tails together, just for the sadistic pleasure of watching them claw each other to death. As he grew older, his nature remained largely unchanged. After briefly working as a schoolteacher in Ohio and Illinois, he fled to Kansas in 1857 to avoid charges of horse theft. His stay in Kansas was short-lived as he traveled with an Army supply train to Utah in 1858. Along the way, he encountered pro-slavery Southerners who strongly influenced his beliefs, despite his Unionist family background. In Utah, he adopted the alias Charles Hart, lived as a gambler, and quickly became associated with multiple murders and thefts at Fort Bridger, Wyoming, and other places in the region. Evading a warrant for his arrest, he returned to Kansas. In December 1860, he joined a group of Kansas Free State men with the apparent aim of freeing slaves belonging to a Missouri man named Morgan Walker. However, Quantrill's involvement was a deceit. As the Jayhawkers concealed themselves in the bushes, Quantrill volunteered to scout the area. Before long, Quantrill and Walker returned to ambush the 4 Kansas men, resulting in the deaths of 3 of them. When the Civil War erupted in April 1861, Quantrill eagerly aligned himself with the Confederate cause. He fought alongside Confederate forces at the Battle of Wilson's Creek in Oak Hills, Missouri, in August 1861. This battle marked the beginning of the Civil War in Missouri, which would witness savage guerrilla warfare. As the year progressed, Quantrill grew dissatisfied with the Confederates' hesitant approach to aggressively engaging Union troops. Consequently, he took matters into his own hands, engaging in guerrilla warfare and becoming the leader of Quantrill's raiders. Starting with a small group of no more than a dozen men, this pro-slavery guerrilla band began launching independent attacks on Union camps, patrols, and settlements. In 1862, his gang of marauders quickly expanded to over 100 members, comprising both regular pro-slavery civilians and Confederate soldiers. This growth made him the most influential leader among the various bands of border ruffians that ravaged the region. Some notable future outlaws, such as Frank and Jesse James and the Younger brothers, joined his group of ruffians. Quantrill and his gang, fueled by their belief in seeking retribution for perceived injustices at the hands of Kansas Jayhawkers and federal authorities, carried out a series of unlawful activities throughout the year. They robbed Union mail, ambushed federal patrols, and attacked boats on the Missouri River. Quantrill, embodying the persona of an outlaw, murderer, and thief, capitalized on the chaos to conduct profitable hit-and-run attacks on both pro-Union sympathizers and federal troops. On August 11, 1862, Colonel J.T. Hughes's Confederate forces, including William Quantrill, launched an assault on Independence, Missouri at dawn. They swept through the town, capturing, killing, and scattering the Union forces. In the midst of the chaos, Colonel Hughes lost his life, but the Confederates successfully took control of Independence, establishing Confederate dominance in the Kansas City area for a brief period. Quantrill's role in this capture earned him a commission as a captain in the Confederate Army. On the evening of September 6, 1862, William Quantrill led his Confederate guerrillas, numbering between 125 and 150, in a raid on Olathe, Kansas. This raid resulted in 6 deaths and significant damage to the town. Quantrill managed to capture the military outpost and attempted to compel the captured men to pledge allegiance to the Confederacy. However, the oath was later declared invalid in November 1862, as the guerrillas were not recognized as legitimate enemy military units. The Olathe military post remained under the occupation of Kansas militia throughout the rest of the Civil War. On October 17, 1862, Quantrill and his gang set out to attack Shawnee, Kansas. As they approached their destination, they encountered a federal supply train and captured 12 unarmed men. Tragically, these 12 drivers and Union escorts were later discovered dead, nearly all of them shot in the head. Subsequently, Quantrill and his gang assaulted the town, resulting in the deaths of 2 men and the complete destruction of the settlement. Shortly thereafter, Quantrill journeyed to Richmond, Virginia, seeking a formal command within the Confederacy under the Partisan Ranger Act. However, his reputation for extreme brutality had preceded him, leading to the rejection of his request. Around the same time, Major General Henry W. Halleck, the commander of the Department of Missouri, issued an order that classified guerrillas like Quantrill and his men as criminals, not ordinary prisoners of war. Following this declaration, Quantrill's tactics grew even more aggressive as he no longer respected the customary practice of accepting enemy surrenders. In May 1863, Quantrill and his gang moved closer to the Missouri-Kansas border. Brigadier General Thomas Ewing, Jr., who oversaw the border district in Kansas, was displeased with their presence. Consequently, he issued General Order No. 11, which stipulated that anyone, regardless of age or gender, directly assisting a guerrilla band would be imprisoned. The objective was to force the border ruffians out of the area by depriving them of food and shelter. Before long, women and children were rounded up and placed in a decrepit 3-story building in downtown Kansas City, Missouri. Notably, the federal troops targeted the known relatives of the border ruffians, including the family members of figures like Bloody Bill Anderson and the Younger brothers. Despite clear signs of the building's instability, such as significant cracks in the walls and ceilings and a substantial amount of mortar dust on the floor, these warning signs were disregarded. Tragedy struck on August 13, 1863, when the building collapsed, resulting in the deaths of 5 women and numerous injuries among those inside. Among those who perished and were injured in the collapse of the building were women closely related to prominent Confederate guerrillas. The victims included Josephine Anderson, the sister of Bloody Bill Anderson, Susan Crawford Vandever, and Armenia Crawford Selvey, who were cousins of Cole Younger, Charity McCorkle Kerr, the wife of Quantrillian member Nathan Kerr, and a woman named Mrs. Wilson. Many others suffered injuries and lifelong scars. Caroline Younger, the sister of Cole and James Younger, succumbed to her injuries 2 years later. Another Anderson sister was left permanently disabled with broken legs from the incident. Upon learning of the building collapse, the families of the deceased and injured reacted with outrage. Crowds quickly gathered around the wreckage as the dead and wounded were removed, vociferously accusing the Union forces of murder. Later, Quantrill and his men would use this incident as a pretext for their infamous attack on Lawrence, which was soon to follow. In the early morning hours of August 21, 1863, Quantrill, along with his ruthless band of approximately 400 followers, descended upon the still sleeping town of Lawrence, Kansas. Fueled by their anger toward the Free State headquarters town, Quantrill embarked on a vengeful rampage against the Jayhawker community. In this meticulously planned raid at dawn, Quantrill and his gang unleashed 4 horrifying hours of violence, transforming the town into a bloody and fiery inferno marked by unparalleled brutality. Commencing at 5 a.m., Quantrill and his bushwhacker raiders looted and set fires as they advanced, with the sole objective of completely obliterating the town, which had fewer than 3,000 residents at the time. When the carnage finally subsided, they had killed an estimated 180 men and boys, leaving Lawrence nothing but smoldering ruins. The Lawrence massacre triggered swift retaliation, with Union troops issuing General Order 11 on August 25, 1863, which compelled the residents of 4 border counties in Missouri to vacate their homes, effectively turning the area into a lawless wasteland. The federal troops and Kansas Jayhawkers promptly engaged in the widespread burning and looting of everything left behind. Forced to retreat, Quantrill and his men headed south to Texas. While on their journey, Quantrill's well-mounted and heavily armed force of 400 men encountered the 100-man headquarters escort of Union General James G. Blunt. On October 6, 1863, Quantrill's gang launched an attack, resulting in the Barter Springs Massacre, where more than 80 men were killed. Upon reaching Texas, Quantrill reported to General Henry E. McCulloch in Bonham on October 26, 1863. He and his men were tasked with rounding up deserters and draft dodgers in North Texas. While they managed to capture a few, they killed even more. McCulloch eventually reassigned them from this duty and directed them to pursue retreating Comanches who had recently raided the northwest frontier, although this mission yielded no success. During their winter stay in Texas, Quantrill's lieutenant, William Bloody Bill Anderson, organized his own group. With two such bands operating in the area, Texas residents became targets for raids and rampant violence, necessitating the deployment of regular Confederate forces to protect them from these irregular Confederate units. General McCulloch eventually decided to eliminate Quantrill's influence in North Texas and arrested him on March 28, 1864, on charges related to ordering the murder of a Confederate major. However, Quantrill managed to escape and return to his camp near Sherman, Texas, pursued by more than 300 state and Confederate troops. His gang then crossed the Red River into Indian Territory, Oklahoma, where they resupplied from Confederate stores and began their arduous journey back to Missouri. Over time, Quantrill's guerrilla band began to fragment into several smaller factions. His ruthless lieutenant, Bloody Bill Anderson, infamous for wearing a necklace made of Yankee scalps into battle, continued to terrorize Missouri. As Quantrill's authority waned, his followers elected George Todd, a former lieutenant, as their new leader. Anderson achieved notoriety for a massacre and battle with Union soldiers in Centralia, Missouri, on September 27, 1864. Leading a group of around 70 men, some dressed in Union uniforms, Anderson and his men showed no mercy as they systematically pillaged homes and stores in Centralia. They barricaded a train approaching the town and found 23 unarmed Union soldiers on leave. These soldiers were forced to undress and were then shot and killed, horrifying the Centralia residents and train passengers who witnessed the gruesome act. Sergeant Tom Goodman, one of the Union soldiers taken hostage by the Anderson guerrillas, survived the ordeal and later documented the entire incident after the Civil War. In a final act of wanton destruction, the guerrillas set fire to the Centralia depot, looted and ignited the train, and sent it westward unmanned, causing it to crash and be destroyed later on. A month after this horrific event, Anderson would meet his demise in battle near Orick, Missouri. During this time, Quantrill formulated a plot to lead a company of men to Washington with the aim of assassinating President Abraham Lincoln in an attempt to restore his reputation. He gathered a group of raiders in Lafayette County, Missouri, in the months of November and December in 1864, all with the intent of carrying out this mission. However, he soon realized that the Union forces east of the Mississippi River were too formidable, making his plan unlikely to succeed. As a result, Quantrill abandoned the scheme and resumed his usual pattern of raiding. In early 1865, with a band of 33 men, he entered Kentucky. In May, a Unionist irregular force ambushed his group near Taylorsville, Kentucky, leading to a battle in which William Quantrill was shot through the spine. He succumbed to his injuries at the military prison in Louisville, Kentucky, on June 6, 1865. He was laid to rest at the Missouri Confederate Soldiers Memorial in Higginsville, Missouri.